If you were gaming back in 1996, there's a good chance that you heard a rumour. Maybe you saw it in a magazine, or it was whispered to you in the schoolyard, but either way, the gossip was consistent. Luigi was in Mario 64.
It was an urban legend that Luigi was in the game somewhere, hiding away.
I would love for Luigi to truly be in the game. That doesn't mean that he's there.
The rumour was relentless, and the appetite for Mario's brother grew by the day. IGN, however, struggled to believe that it was true, and in an effort to dispel the myth once and for all, in 1996, we posted a bounty.
You were going to help me find my brother.
The message was simple: prove that Luigi is in the game and we will pay you $100.
Mamma mia!
Well, that was just the biggest mistake I think I'd ever made.
Everybody had a theory about where Luigi was.
Countless tried, none succeeded, and after 24 years, people moved on. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, Nintendo's source code was exposed to the world, and buried in there was a lead.
Seemingly, it was legit.
That blew my mind, I'm gonna be honest.
Luigi, it appeared, was there, hidden in a place where nobody could look.
We found him in the Darklands.
So now, 30 years later, it's time to finish this. Let's settle this bounty once and for all.
Do I owe you $100?
Hello!
Before Super Mario 64 arrived in 1996, it was inconceivable that Mario's first jump to 3 dimensions would happen without his brother. Together, they formed the titular Mario Brothers that we'd seen on the front of game boxes since 1985. But the inconceivable happened. Mario 64 was a solo adventure for Nintendo's original Jumping Man. That wasn't always the original plan though. In an interview for the official Japanese strategy guide, creator Shigeru Miyamoto explained that the team had been forced to remove Luigi, stating that, ultimately, due to memory issues, we had to take him out. So, Luigi was never in Mario 64. Open and shut case. But that didn't stop all the rumours spreading like wildfire.
Everybody thought that Luigi was somewhere hidden in Mario 64. It was the era of secrets that you couldn't just look up on the internet. It was the era of myths about video game Easter eggs that you would whisper to each other as you were playing, or you would talk about it in the playground if you were at school. Everybody had a theory about where Luigi was in Super Mario 64.
I believe I stumbled across the one video that showcased a modded Luigi. It was a very good footage of modded Luigi with a very funky head walking around the castle, and it was like, damn, how do I unlock this?
This Luigi hearsay wasn't completely unfounded. Its origins all stemmed from a simple, practically unreadable sign in the courtyard of Peach's castle.
This notice board hidden away in the castle had a message that no one could read on it, and so everybody had a theory.
The texture quality was very low at the time. There was a black that some people interpreted as reading L is real 2401. It was very hard to make out, and so it was very plausible that it might have been that.
The text on the sign, I'm pretty sure, was just nonsense, but that's what people thought it said. L is real 2401, and people from that took that, yes, Luigi is in the game, and you had to do something to find him, whether that was collect 2,401 stars or jump 2,401 times in a specific spot, something. It was a message from Shigeru Miyamoto himself. Luigi was waiting somewhere for you to go find.
Super Mario 64 was like nothing else on the market in 1996, defining not only the rules for 3D platformers, but also quickly establishing itself as one of the greatest video games of all time. But perhaps where it stood out the most, at least to a legion of Luigi obsessives, was the sheer volume of secrets that you could find.
It's a remarkable game. There were so many little hidden things all the way through the game that made it so much fun to explore. The sense of discovery was one of the things that made it so remarkable and long-lasting. It made you feel like Luigi could be in there.
But despite the best will of the community, Luigi was nowhere to be found. After collecting all 120 stars, players were rewarded with a secret Yoshi, hidden right at the start of the game. But no matter how hard they looked, there was no trace of the mustachioed brother. He would eventually arrive in the Nintendo DS port of the game, but fans were still convinced he was in the original.
I would love for Luigi to truly be in the game. I think that would be amazing, but that doesn't mean that he's there.
But do you have another way to save my brother?
The audience, however, armed with a hidden message, were undeterred. Luigi had to be in the game, and L is Real 2401 was the clue that they needed. At the same time, a burgeoning website called n64.com launched and was quickly inundated with questions about the missing plumber. In an effort to dispel the myth once and for all, a young editor named Douglas C. Perry decided to put his money where his mouth was and offered a $100 bounty to anyone that could solve the mystery. It was a call to arms that he'd very quickly regret.
He looks exactly like me, but tall and skinny and green.
The staff of n64.com, which would later change its name to IGN64 and then just IGN, thought nothing of their bounty story. It was just one article towards a daily quota, and the assumption was that it'd be forgotten in perhaps less time than it took to post it.
Hey, Doug, can you write 5 stories a day? And I was like, yeah, I can do it. Blindly accepted the challenge. And so, we were constantly looking for things to write. And of course, these emails started coming in about Luigi, and we were like, he's not in the game. We would have found him by now, right? But the emails were relentless. And finally, I think for me, I was like, well, fine, let's just put the challenge out there for players to find Luigi. Because if he's in there, someone's going to find it, right? Yeah, I put the challenge out there and said, if you can find Luigi in the game, show us the steps and pictures and we'll reward you. Well, that was just the biggest mistake I think I'd ever made.
In 1996, the internet was in its infancy, so the idea of the answer being a quick Google search away was a distant, warp-pipe dream. In the late 90s, rumours like the ability to revive Aerith in Final Fantasy VII or a secret code to reduce Lara Croft to a bare pixels were prevalent in schoolyards. Fans laboured over these urban myths, waiting months at a time for them to either be solved or dispelled in magazines. The internet, though, had begun to speed up the process, and with $100 on the line, the audience wasn't going to wait patiently for their answers.
Let's go.
We had mountains of emails coming in, just relentless. I hadn't really thought past the challenge part. I was like, oh, I have to follow all these instructions and go through every single one of these challenges.
I'm tired.
There'd be like 10 instructions. Go to this waterfall, go to the edge, look down, jump into the waterfall, climb up the rocks all the way to the inside of this waterfall, take 4 steps to the right, 2 steps forward, and then you'll unlock Luigi.
The staff at n64.com were confident Luigi wasn't in the game, but others still desperately sought confirmation. 2 years later, in response to an ardent fan, Nintendo of America sent a letter confirming that L is Real was simply a joke placed by the developers, although evidence of that letter wouldn't make its way onto gaming forums until many years later, and that's assuming that it was even legitimate. So, true confirmation was still decades away.
We have a long journey ahead of us, Mustache.
Someone would have said something by now. I was reading Nintendo Power at the time. I was reading magazines. All of them were all about codes and secrets, and there was nothing in those magazines. I literally had tried 100 different ways to unlock Luigi, and none of them worked. But it didn't stop the emails from coming.
What started out as a fun article had spiraled out of control with no end in sight. Miyamoto had confirmed he wasn't there, Nintendo of America confirmed he wasn't there, and not a single person could confirm to IGN that they'd even had a whiff of Luigi. All they had was L is Real 2401. That was until 24 years and 1 month later.
We have found the mustachioed human!
In July 2020, details of secret Nintendo development data began to surface, and what started off as a trickle of information quickly spiraled into one of the biggest video game leaks in history.
I remember seeing this pop up online and it just completely spread like wildfire across social media, Reddit, Processora, all the video game forums. I think I thought that it was a fake at first, but seemingly it was legit.
Enormous amounts of development information began pouring out as hacked data was mined by eager fans desperate to learn more about Nintendo. Fans were quick to dub this enormous data breach the Gigaleak, as they sifted through mountains of designs, prototypes, and source material that Nintendo never intended to see the light of day.
This was stuff that was never meant to be deliberately released in any form by Nintendo.
One person whose curiosity was piqued by the news was an anonymous software engineer / visual artist known only as Glitchy PSI, who also happened to be a passionate Super Mario 64 fan. With potentially massive Mario revelations ready for the taking, they were keen to dive into the Gigaleak and see what they could discover.
It is like finding some kind of treasure, even though the questionable legality of it was kind of like, damn, this is kind of scary. There were a lot of comments by people, I believe, to actually work on this stuff. I believe there was a Star Fox developer who said something about disrespecting people's work. There was a lot of fear, but in my circles, there was a lot of excitement because people wanted to look at the assets themselves.
We need to find out as much as we can about what was in this cache of files. I sort of adhere to the argument that this stuff is just so interesting and important for fans of Nintendo games, for fans of video games as a medium. It's a part of our culture, and I think the more we know about it, the better, whether Nintendo agrees with that or not.
So the files were quote-unquote encrypted, so you had to run a tool to actually get to the contents of the actual files, like as they were laid out in the file system. You can imagine what kind of other things I found in there.
What was discovered was a treasure trove of unreleased Nintendo content. There were prototypes for games like Yoshi's Island, Super Mario Kart, and Star Fox 2, mini-games that never saw the light of day, unused art assets, location and character beta designs, and so much more.
I was refreshing that page trying to see like the latest stuff that have been pieced together from it. You never ever see how the product is made, and so that was what was so exciting about the Gigaleak, to see the work in progress, the things that were left on the cutting room floor. This is stuff that you, as a Nintendo fan myself, you just never get to see, and it's just absolutely fascinating to see sort of their thinking, the things that they left behind.
The Gigaleak was a goldmine for any Nintendo fan, but once word got out that there was source code for an early build of Super Mario 64, Glitchy & Co. immediately got to work.
I checked the source file, there were no like raw images, but I noticed something.
Glitchy immediately recognized the code language they'd used in modding tools for fan-made Nintendo 64 projects. The file structure was similar, so it made sense that they could find a way to dive deeper.
Maybe with the tools, people can recreate stuff, and I already had experience with textures. I made a little program to like take the raw data that was in textures, like defined byte by byte. It would take that and it would make it a PNG. And I was showing to the people in Discord, and they were like, oh damn, maybe we can find more textures this way.
Not only did they discover more textures in the source code, but Glitchy found something that would change the history of the L is real movement forever. A texture of a white circle with a green L.
I don't want to like toot my own horn, but it is probably true that I was the first person.
The proof, although obtained by nefarious means, had finally arrived. Modders immediately got to work finding other elements and eventually pieced Luigi together in Mario 64. Now, although it was never released by Nintendo, was finally evidence of a version of the classic game that featured Luigi. Even if the sign in Peach's courtyard never said L is real 2401, serendipitously, the message actually ended up coming true. Luigi's textures were discovered on July 25, 2020. 24 years and 1 month after Mario 64's original Japanese release.
That blew my mind, I'm gonna be honest.
Shigeru Miyamoto, you just can't put anything past him, can you? This is why they don't allow him to talk to the press that much anymore, because he's just going to tell us our own futures and it's all going to be very depressing. Yeah, maybe this was Nintendo's plan all along. Maybe they leaked the Gigaleak. L really is real. You heard it here first.
After years of searching for the superstar, it is finally ours!
Do I owe you $100?
30 years ago, IGN posted a $100 bounty for anyone who could prove that Luigi was in Super Mario 64. It took over 24 years and crowdsourced data mining of illegally obtained assets to solve, but we finally had our answer. So, once and for all, 30 years later, it's time to settle IGN's debt. Given the nature of the solution and the wholesome determination of the L is real community, we've made a $100 donation to Able Gamers, a charity that combats social isolation, fosters inclusive communities, and improves the quality of life for people with disabilities. In 2026, it's hard to imagine gaming mysteries lasting more than a week. Before you know it, dedicated fans are sifting through code, breaking boundaries with free cams, and searching every nook and cranny for evidence of a game's previous iterations. So there's something quite magical about Nintendo and its ability to keep its secrets so closely guarded.
There are so many projects in the Nintendo files in their vaults that the Gigaleak did not even touch. And I feel like the world will never know all of the things that Nintendo got extremely close to releasing and then just pulled at the last minute. So yes, the Gigaleak was such a rare opportunity to get some of this detail and just do this amazing process.
But Nintendo's special skill isn't just its ability to hold its cards close to its chest. Since the birth of its console business, Nintendo has crafted worlds full of wonder, locations for players to get lost in and comb for clues, and the overwhelming desire to discover more is perhaps the biggest compliment you can pay a creator like Shigeru Miyamoto. Mario 64 is now 30 years old, but the passion and love that it's garnered has never wavered. People never forgot about Luigi because they never wanted to forget about Super Mario 64. And even though it was the birth of the modern 3D platformer, perhaps its greatest legacy is that 30 years later, people are still excited to see what else there is to discover.
That's the kind of beauty that he instills in all his games and makes people feel like they're going to discover something. It makes people feel like it could be there. You just have to dig a little deeper. And I think that's kind of an amazing, once-in-a-lifetime genius that we may never see again.
Yahoo! And if you like that video and you want to learn more about Mario 64, particularly the design of its opening level Bob-omb Battlefield, then make sure to check out our art of the level. And for everything else Mario and settling old bounties, be sure to stick with IGN.